It happens the exact millisecond consciousness returns to your body. Before you have even opened your eyes, before you have checked your phone, and before your conscious mind can register what day of the week it is, a heavy, unprovoked wave of panic settles directly into the center of your chest. Your heart rate escalates, your muscles tighten, and a cold sensation of impending doom ripples through your nervous system. Within seconds, your brain reacts to this physical state by scrambling backward through your memory, desperately searching for a crisis, a past mistake, or an upcoming responsibility to justify the sheer terror your body is already experiencing. If it cannot find a real problem, it will invent one, projecting hyper-detailed scenarios of failure or financial ruin just to match your internal chemistry. Most adults live under the assumption that this morning anxiety is a profound psychological flaw. They believe it is proof of their inability to cope with life, a sign of burnout, or the symptom of an unresolved existential crisis. They spend years in therapy trying to untangle the mental reasons behind their morning misery, assuming the thoughts are causing the feeling. But the reality is far more clinical, cold, and mechanical. You are not experiencing a sudden psychological collapse. What you are feeling is a microscopic, predictable, and entirely physical anomaly hidden inside your endocrine system. Your mind is not waking up to a real crisis. It is being aggressively hijacked by a primitive hormonal mechanism designed millions of years ago. To understand why your mornings feel like a battle for survival, we have to look past your thoughts and zoom directly into a tiny cluster of neurons in your brainstem that controls your perception of reality before you are even fully awake. To decipher the origin of this early morning panic, we must isolate a precise biological phenomenon known to neuroscientists as the Cortisol Awakening Response, or CAR. Cortisol is frequently labeled as the body's primary stress hormone, but its baseline evolutionary function is actually a dynamic energy regulator. Under normal biological conditions, your cortisol levels follow a strict 24-hour rhythm dictated by light. They drop to their lowest point around midnight to allow for deep tissue repair, and then they begin a slow, incremental climb while you sleep. However, the moment your brain detects the transition from sleep to wakefulness, a dramatic chemical event occurs. Within 30 to 45 minutes of your eyes opening, your endocrine system initiates a massive, violent surge of cortisol, spiking your internal levels by over 50 to 75%. This is not a gradual ramp-up. It is a chemical explosion. For a healthy individual, this rapid hormonal influx acts as an internal alarm clock. It elevates blood pressure, mobilizes glucose reserves, and provides the physiological drive required to break the heavy paralysis of sleep and pull your body out of bed. It is a necessary jolt of energy, but when your nervous system is exposed to chronic low-grade daily pressure, this natural awakening mechanism mutates. The spike does not just wake you up, it overshoots the biological threshold, flooding your bloodstream with a toxic volume of stress chemicals. The brain does not register this surge as an energy cue. It interprets it as an immediate threat to life, activating your survival circuitry before your logical mind can even intervene. This morning chemical flood is dictated by a complex subconscious feedback loop called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, commonly referred to as the HPA axis. Think of the HPA axis as the master thermostat for your body's stress response, operating entirely below your conscious awareness. The process begins in the hypothalamus, a tiny region at the base of your brain that acts as the bridge between your nervous system and your hormonal system. The moment you cross the threshold from sleep to wakefulness, the hypothalamus releases a chemical messenger called corticotropin-releasing hormone. This messenger travels a microscopic distance to the pituitary gland, instructing it to release adrenocorticotropic hormone into your bloodstream. This hormone travels down to your kidneys, where it strikes the adrenal cortex like a mallet against a drum, commanding it to manufacture and dump massive quantities of cortisol into your system. In a perfectly balanced body, this system has a built-in safety shut-off valve. As cortisol levels rise, the brain detects the excess and orders the hypothalamus to stop production, bringing you back to a calm, focused baseline. But when you are carrying sustained adult pressure, the brain's internal receptors become entirely desensitized to cortisol. The shut-off valve fails. The HPA axis gets stuck in an infinite loop, pumping out stress hormones long after the safety threshold has been crossed. At dawn, when the system naturally tries to kickstart your body, this malfunction results in an uncontrolled chemical deluge, drowning your tissues in stress before you can even take your first breath. The true psychological horror of morning anxiety is not just the presence of the hormones, but the structural layout of the brain pathways through which they travel. When you wake up, your sensory organs send raw data through the thalamus, which acts as the brain's central switching station. From here, the data must travel to two completely different destinations: the amygdala, which is the ancient, primitive center for emotional threat detection, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of logic, language, and rational thought. Crucially, the neural pathway from the thalamus to the amygdala is short, direct, and rapid, taking roughly 12 milliseconds to transmit information. In contrast, the pathway from the thalamus to the rational prefrontal cortex is long, complex, and slow, requiring twice as much time to process. This creates a terrifying 12-millisecond logic gap every single morning. Your amygdala receives the physical sensation of the cortisol spike 12 milliseconds before your rational brain has the data required that you are safe in bed. For those 12 milliseconds, you are operating entirely on raw animal survival instinct. Because the amygdala possesses no capacity for language or logic, it cannot say, "This is just a routine hormonal surge." It can only scream that you are under attack. By the time your prefrontal cortex finally boots up and receives the signal, the emotional fire has already consumed your nervous system. Your logical mind is forced to play catch-up, frantically creating terrifying thoughts to explain the physical panic that has already taken root. Because the human mind is hardwired to seek cause and effect relationships, it cannot tolerate experiencing intense physical terror without a visible explanation. When the amygdala fires its alarm due to the cortisol spike, it triggers a cognitive process known as emotional attribution error. The brain hates mystery. It requires a target for its fear. If you wake up with your heart pounding and your adrenaline pumping, your mind instantly assumes there must be a catastrophic external reason for it. It immediately begins scanning your immediate life history for any available vulnerability. It pulls up an unresolved email from your manager, a minor disagreement you had with a partner 3 days ago, or a vague worry about your long-term savings. In reality, none of these issues are urgent enough to warrant a panic attack at 6 a.m. Under normal daytime conditions, your brain would categorize these problems as manageable tasks. But in the fragile state of early morning biochemistry, your mind seizes upon these minor concerns, inflating them into existential crises. The thought does not create the panic creates the thought. You are trapped in a profound cognitive illusion, where a routine chemical fluctuation in your kidneys convinces your conscious mind that your entire life is actively falling apart. If you do not understand this mechanical order of operations, you will spend your morning fighting imaginary battles against thoughts that are nothing more than the smoke produced by a hidden biological fire. To fully map out this morning struggle, we must look at how this chemical surge disrupts the delicate equilibrium of your autonomic nervous system. This system is divided into two competing branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which drives your fight-or-flight response, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs your rest and digest functions. During deep sleep, the parasympathetic branch is dominant, lowering your heart rate, reducing your blood pressure, and keeping your body in a state of absolute immobilization and recovery. The transition to waking up requires a smooth, coordinated handoff from the parasympathetic to the sympathetic branch. However, when an exaggerated cortisol response floods your system at dawn, this handoff becomes violent and disorganized. The sympathetic nervous system slams on the accelerator while your body is still physically paralyzed by sleep. This creates a severe biological mismatch. Your heart rate escalates, and your breathing becomes shallow, signaling to your brain that you need to run or fight for your life. Yet, because you are still lying down in a dark, silent room, there is no physical outlet for this kinetic energy. Flight response is designed to be expended through intense muscle movement, running away from a predator or fighting an enemy. When that physical expression is impossible, the trapped kinetic energy is forced inward, transforming from a physical impulse into an acute, paralyzing mental state of pure psychological dread. While your survival architecture is burning with cortisol, your higher cognitive centers are suffering from a temporary power outage. When you first emerge from sleep, your brain experiences a state called sleep inertia. This is a transitional period lasting anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes, during which the neural networks responsible for complex decision-making, emotional regulation, and perspective are slow to activate. The prefrontal cortex, which acts as the adult manager of your mind, requires significant blood flow and glucose to fully boot up its systems. Unfortunately, a massive cortisol spike actively diverts blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex and redirects it toward the primitive hindbrain to prepare for physical survival. This means that during the exact window of time when your body is experiencing its highest levels of physical panic, your internal mechanism for rational perspective at its lowest capacity. You are trying to solve complex life problems with a brain that is temporarily starved of the energy required for logic. This is why morning worries feel entirely unmanageable and absolute. That normally remind you of your past successes, your resilience, is completely offline. You are left entirely defenseless against the raw, unedited projections of your survival brain, making every minor obstacle look like an insurmountable mountain until the sleep inertia finally lifts and blood flow is restored to your logical center. To understand why the human brain is built with such a volatile and seemingly destructive morning mechanism, we must abandon our modern context and look at the brutal realities of evolutionary history. The human nervous system did not evolve to exist in safe, insulated modern bedrooms with locked doors and climate control. For over 99% of human history, waking up was the most dangerous moment of the day. As a prehistoric hominid sleeping in an open savanna or a vulnerable cave, the transition from sleep to wakefulness was the exact window of time when you were most exposed to apex predators, rival tribes, and environmental hazards. A human who woke up feeling completely relaxed, slow, and serene would be regular prey. Survival favored the individuals whose brains developed a violent, hyperreactive morning alarm mechanism. The Cortisol Awakening Response was an evolutionary masterpiece. It deliberately flooded the prehistoric body with stress chemicals at dawn to ensure that the moment consciousness returned, the individual was instantly hypervigilant, physically aggressive, and prepared to kill or flee at a second's notice. The morning dread you feel in your chest today is not a broken design. It is an ancient survival adaptation that functioned perfectly for hundreds of thousands of years. The tragedy of the modern adult is that we are forced to navigate this primitive predatory alarm system while staring at a bedroom ceiling, with no physical predators to fight and nowhere to run. If this morning alarm system is a natural part of human biology, we must ask why it transitions from a manageable wake-up call into an agonizing daily crisis for so many adults. The answer lies in the concept of allostatic load, the cumulative wear and tear that chronic psychological pressure inflicts on the human body. When you experience unresolved worries throughout your day, such as financial uncertainty, career instability, or continuous microstress, your body never fully returns to its parasympathetic baseline. You go to bed with an elevated level of residual cortisol circulating through your tissues. While you sleep, Your brain attempts to reset your hormonal balance, but the continuous background stress acts as a constant signal of danger. The HPA axis interprets this sustained daytime anxiety as an indication that you are living in a highly hostile environment. In response, it recalibrates your morning alarm system. The brain reasons that if you are under constant threat during the day, you need an even more aggressive surge of stress hormones to survive the morning. The cortisol awakening response is artificially amplified by your subconscious mind, transforming a standard biological transition into a massive toxic chemical spike. Your morning anxiety is actually the delayed echo of your yesterday's unmanaged stress, stored in your tissues overnight and detonated the moment your eyes open. The severity of the morning chemical spike is also intimately linked to the microscopic structure of your sleep architecture, specifically during the final hours of the night. Sleep is not a uniform state of unconsciousness. It is a highly calculated sequence of 90-minute cycles that alternate between deep sleep and rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. During the first half of the night, your brain prioritizes deep, slow-wave sleep to facilitate physical recovery. However, as morning approaches, the balance shifts dramatically, and your brain spends the majority of its time in prolonged stages of REM sleep. A REM is the stage where dreaming occurs, and it is characterized by intense neural activity that closely mirrors wakefulness. Crucially, during a normal REM cycle, the brain deliberately deactivates the production of noradrenaline, creating a unique, anxiety-free chemical environment where your mind can safely reprocess emotional memories from the previous day without experiencing physical fear. But when your baseline cortisol is elevated by chronic stress, this delicate neural sanctuary is violated. The high level of stress hormones leaks into your REM sleep, disrupting the brain's emotional cleaning process. Instead of processing your worries safely, your brain loops through vivid, stress-inducing dreams. You spend the final hours of the night running your nervous system hot, meaning that when you finally cross the threshold into wakefulness, your amygdala is already primed, hyperreactive, and waiting to explode. Once this morning chemical surge occurs for several days in a row, a secondary, highly destructive psychological feedback loop locks itself into place. The human brain is a highly advanced pattern recognition machine that constantly attempts to predict future discomfort to protect itself. When you wake up multiple mornings experiencing intense physical dread, your brain begins to form a powerful associative memory. It learns to associate the literal act of waking up with the sensation of terror. This triggers a phenomenon known as anticipatory anxiety. Before you even fall asleep at night, your subconscious mind begins to dread the arrival of the morning. As you sleep, your brainstem tracks the hours, anticipating the upcoming dawn. Because your brain is actively anticipating a crisis at sunrise, it prematurely activates the HPA axis while you are still unconscious. The hypothalamus begins releasing stress signals hours ahead of schedule, completely destroying the quality of your early morning sleep. You find yourself waking up completely exhausted at 4 or 5 a.m., your body already vibrating with adrenaline before the natural awakening response has even begun. You are no longer just reacting to a physical cortisol surge. You are trapped in a learned behavioral loop where your brain's fear of morning anxiety is the exact mechanism that ensures it will happen again. When we systematically dissect the complete neurobiology of morning dread, we arrive at an objective, grounding realization that completely alters how we view our internal struggles. The crushing anxiety you experience at dawn is not a moral failing, a sign of structural weakness, or an accurate reflection of the state of your life. It is a highly specific, predictable biological delusion created by the intersection of an ancient survival mechanism, a temporary logic gap in your neural pathways, and a routine hormonal spike in your kidneys. The terrifying thoughts that flood your mind at 6 a.m. are not profound truths. They are nothing more than your brain's clumsy, desperate attempt to invent a narrative for a physical chemical surge it does not understand. Recognizing this mechanical order of operations is the key to stripping the experience of its power. When you wake up and feel the cold weight of dread settle into your chest, you do not need to fix your life, solve your problems, or engage with the panic. Your only objective is to recognize the illusion for what it is. You can look at the terror objectively and understand that your prefrontal cortex is simply waiting for its fuel. Your amygdala is operating on a 12-millisecond delay, and your body is clearing an evolutionary survival surge. By removing the moral shame and the cognitive attribution from the feeling, you allow the chemical wave to wash through your system and naturally recede, leaving your mind intact.